Dr. Lyra Thane pressed her face against the viewport of the research vessel Nebula, studying the derelict space station that loomed before them. Its massive ring structure, now dark and lifeless, had once been humanity's crowning achievement, the last beacon of their civilization before their mysterious extinction. Preliminary scans complete, Doctor, announced her research assistant, Dr. Jace Venn, his silver scales gleaming under the ship's ambient lighting. The station's structural integrity appears stable enough for exploration. Lyra nodded, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with excitement. As the leading xenobiologist of the Celestial Science Institute, she had spent years studying the remnants of human civilization. But this station, hidden in the shadow of a gas giant for millennia, promised to be her most significant discovery yet. "Prepare the boarding team," she ordered, turning to face her diverse crew. "Full containment protocols. We don't know what we might find in there." Within the hour, Lyra led her team through the station's airlock. Their footsteps echoed through empty corridors, the beam of their lights revealing layers of dust undisturbed for thousands of years. The air was stale but breathable, the station's ancient life support systems somehow still functioning at minimal levels. "This section appears to be residential quarters," reported Dr. Naira Soam, her tentacles gracefully manipulating a handheld scanner. "But I'm detecting an unusual power signature 2 levels below." Lyra's heart quickened. "Show me." They made their way deeper into the station, passing abandoned laboratories and empty crew quarters. The power signature led them to a heavily reinforced door marked with faded warning symbols. It took their combined efforts to override the ancient security systems, but finally, the door slid open with a protesting groan. Inside, they found a sight that made Lyra's breath catch in her throat. Row upon row of cryopods lined the walls, their surfaces clouded with age. But unlike the rest of the station, these pods still hummed with power. "By the stars," whispered Jace, moving closer to examine the nearest pod. "They're preservation chambers, but after all this time." "Most of them failed," Naira confirmed, checking her readings. "The occupants." She left the grim conclusion unspoken. But Lyra's attention was drawn to a single pod at the far end of the room. Unlike the others, its status display still glowed with a steady green light. As she approached, her hand trembling slightly, she wiped away the condensation from its surface and found herself staring into the face of a sleeping human. "This one's still active," she announced, her voice trembling with excitement. "Life signs are stable, it's perfectly preserved." The pod's occupant was a man in his early 30s, his features strong and defined. Dark hair framed a face that seemed peaceful in its artificial slumber. According to the pod's data display, his name was Rowan Drake. "We need to wake him," Lyra decided, already beginning to analyze the pod's revival protocols. "Dr. Thane," Jace protested, "the ethical implications." "He's the last of his kind," Lyra cut him off, her markings pulsing with determination. "We can't leave him here." The revival process took nearly an hour, during which Lyra barely breathed. When the pod finally hissed open, she leaned forward, watching intently as color returned to the human's face. His eyes fluttered open, a startling shade of gray, and focused on her with surprising clarity. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, two beings separated by millennia of evolution and extinction, meeting across an impossible divide. Then he spoke, his voice rough from disuse but surprisingly strong. "You're not human." "No," Lyra replied softly. "I'm not. My name is Dr. Lyra Thane. You're on the station Horizon's Edge, but much time has passed since you entered stasis." Rowan Drake sat up slowly, his movements careful but coordinated. "How long?" Lyra hesitated, knowing the weight her next words would carry. "According to our records, approximately 5,000 years." He showed remarkable composure, though she noticed his hands gripping the edge of the pod tightly. "And the others, the other pods?" "You're the only survivor," she said gently. "I'm sorry." Rowan closed his eyes, grief etching itself across his features. When he opened them again, they burned with an intensity that made Lyra step back. "Why wake me? What do you want?" "To learn," she answered honestly, "to understand. Humanity achieved incredible things before their extinction, things we're still trying to comprehend, and now," she gestured to him, "you're a bridge to that lost knowledge." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A living museum piece, you mean?" "No," Lyra said firmly, her markings flashing with conviction. "A survivor. Someone who deserves a chance to live, not just exist as a specimen in a lab. I give you my word, you will be treated with respect and dignity." Rowan studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes seeming to peer into her very soul. Finally, he nodded slowly. I don't have much choice, do I? This isn't my world anymore. Perhaps not, Lyra agreed. But maybe together we can build something new, something that honors what was lost while embracing what could be. As she helped him stand on legs unused for millennia, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a scientific discovery. This was a moment that would change everything for her, for Rowan, and perhaps for the entire galaxy. What she didn't know yet was just how right she was, or how dangerous the path ahead would become. As they made their way back to the nebula, neither of them noticed the small drone that tracked their movements, transmitting their discovery to interested parties far away, parties who had very different plans for humanity's last survivor. Rowan stood at the observation deck of the Celestial Science Institute, watching the swirling purple clouds of the alien world below. 2 weeks had passed since his awakening, yet everything still felt like a dream or perhaps a nightmare. The gleaming spires of the Institute rose around him, a testament to how far the galaxy had evolved in his absence. Your vital signs are improving, Lyra's familiar voice came from behind him. He turned to find her entering the room, her bioluminescent markings creating gentle patterns in the dim light. The cellular regeneration therapy is working better than expected. My body might be adapting, Rowan replied, but my mind. He trailed off, unable to fully express the weight of his displacement. Lyra moved to stand beside him, her presence somehow comforting despite her alien nature. We found something in the station's archives, she said softly, something that doesn't match our historical records. She projected a hologram between them, fragments of data recovered from the station's damaged systems. Rowan's eyes widened as he recognized the encryption patterns. These are military logs, he said, his voice tense. Classified ones, but they're not supposed to exist. All military operations were supposedly shut down years before the evacuation. That's not all. Lyra's markings pulsed with concern as she brought up another projection. We found traces of an artificial pathogen in the failed cryopods, something engineered. Rowan felt his blood run cold. Memories he'd tried to suppress came rushing back, urgent whispers in dark corridors, mysterious deaths, rumors of a project gone wrong. Project Terminus, he whispered. What's Project Terminus? Before he could answer, Dr. Jace Venn burst into the room, his silver scales reflecting the hologram's light. Dr. Thane, we have a problem. The Governance Council is demanding an immediate hearing. Lyra's markings flashed with alarm. They weren't supposed to know about Rowan yet. We haven't completed the initial research protocols. Someone leaked the information, Jace said grimly. And they're not just interested in research. They're talking about security concerns, about potential threats to galactic stability. Rowan laughed bitterly. One human survivor and they're already afraid. Maybe my species deserve to go extinct. No, Lyra's voice was firm as she turned to face him. Your existence threatens them because it challenges everything they've built their power on. The official history of humanity's extinction has shaped policies for millennia, if that history is wrong. Then someone wanted us gone, Rowan finished, the pieces starting to fall into place. And they might not want that truth coming out. The next day found them in the council chambers, a vast circular room where representatives from various species gathered in tiered seating. Rowan stood beside Lyra, acutely aware of the hundreds of alien eyes fixed upon him. High Counselor Dren Voss, a towering figure with crystalline features, addressed them from the central podium. Dr. Thane, you have violated numerous protocols by awakening this specimen without proper authorization. The potential risks. I am not a specimen, Rowan interrupted, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I am a survivor, and I have information about my species' extinction that your histories don't record. A murmur ran through the assembled council members. Dren Voss's crystalline face darkened. What exactly are you implying? We found evidence of biological warfare, Lyra stated, stepping forward. Of military operations that continued long after they were officially disbanded, something called Project Terminus. The reaction was immediate. Several council members rose in protest while others whispered urgently among themselves. But Rowan noticed something else. The way Dren Voss's aide suddenly stiffened, her hand moving to a communication device. These are serious allegations, Dren Voss said, his voice carefully measured. They require thorough investigation. The human will be transferred to a secure facility. Under whose authority? Lyra demanded, her markings flashing defiantly. The Celestial Science Institute has primary jurisdiction over all human artifacts and research. This is no longer merely a scientific matter, Dr. Thane. This is about galactic security. As the argument continued, Rowan felt a subtle vibration through the floor, movement in the levels below perhaps. He caught Lyra's eye and saw that she felt it too. "We need to live," he whispered, "now." They were halfway to the chamber's exit when the first explosion rocked the building. Chaos erupted as council members fled in all directions. Through the smoke, Rowan glimpsed armed figures moving with military precision. "This way," Jace appeared beside them, gesturing toward a service corridor. "There's a secure lab 3 levels down, we can." An energy blast cut through the air where his head had been a moment before. They ran, ducking into the corridor as more explosions shook the building. "They're not trying to capture us," Rowan realized as they descended through emergency stairs. "They're trying to eliminate evidence, including me." "Not just you," Lyra said grimly. "The data we recovered, the samples from the cryopods, they're all in my lab if they destroy it." They reached the lab level to find it already in chaos. Smoke filled the corridors, and they could hear weapons fire in the distance. "The samples," Lyra gasped, rushing to a secure storage unit. She quickly began transferring vials and data crystals into a portable container. "We don't have time," Jace warned, watching the corridor. "They're getting closer." Rowan made a quick decision. Is there another way out of the building, something not on the official plans? "The maintenance tunnels," Lyra said, securing the container. "They lead to an old transport hub, but—" "Then that's our way out." Rowan took the container from her, surprised by how natural it felt to take charge in a crisis. "We need to disappear, regroup, figure out what we're really dealing with." Lyra's markings pulsed with determination as she nodded. "I know someone who might help, an independent researcher named Dr. Kira Voss." "Voss, like the High Counselor?" "His sister," Lyra explained as they moved toward the maintenance access. "And someone who's been asking uncomfortable questions about humanity's extinction for years." As they made their way through the dark tunnels, Rowan couldn't help but feel a grim sense of irony. He had awakened into this future hopping to understand why his species had vanished. Now it seemed he might be about to discover exactly why, if they lived long enough to uncover the truth. Behind them, explosions continued to rock the Institute, destroying evidence of a conspiracy that had shaped the galaxy for millennia. But this time, there would be survivors to tell the tale. This time, the truth would not stay buried in the ashes of history. Dr. Kira Voss's sanctuary turned out to be an abandoned mining facility on a remote asteroid, cleverly disguised as a defunct outpost. As their stolen shuttle docked in the hidden hangar, Rowan noticed the sophisticated security systems masked beneath layers of apparent decay. "My brother always dismissed my research as conspiracy theories," Kira explained as she led them through the facility. Unlike her brother's crystalline features, hers were softened by organic implants, a visible rejection of traditional Voss aesthetics. "But I knew the official history of humanity's extinction didn't add up." The main laboratory was a maze of holographic displays, each showing different fragments of historical data. Lyra's markings pulsed with excitement as she took in the wealth of information. "You've been collecting evidence for years," she breathed. "Decades," Kira corrected, moving to a central console. "But I never had proof until now. The samples you brought combined with my research." She paused, her modified features darkening. "It's worse than I imagined." She brought up a holographic display showing molecular structures that made Rowan's blood run cold. "Project Terminus wasn't just a weapons program," he said, recognizing the patterns. "It was an extinction protocol. Designed to target specific genetic markers," Kira confirmed. "But here's where it gets interesting. The virus wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to sterilize. To ensure humanity would die out slowly, naturally, without realizing they were being systematically erased." Jace, who had been quietly monitoring their security feeds, spoke up. "But why? What could humanity have done to warrant such a response?" "It wasn't what we did," Rowan said quietly, memories surfacing from his final days before stasis. "It was what we were about to do. We were on the verge of something, a breakthrough in evolutionary engineering, the ability to guide our own species' development." Lyra moved closer to him, her markings reflecting concern. "Self-directed evolution, that would have changed everything." "And threatened everyone," Kira added. Imagine a species that could adapt at will, evolving to meet any challenge. The power dynamics of the entire galaxy would have shifted overnight. A sudden alarm cut through their discussion. Jace rushed to the security console, his silver scales reflecting the red warning lights. "We've got incoming, multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace." "How did they find us?" Lyra demanded, but Rowan was already moving toward the screens. "Because they followed the evidence," he said grimly. "Just like we did, we're not the only ones who can decode the past." Kira's fingers flew over the control panels. "My sanctuary has defenses, but not enough to hold off a full assault. We need to move, now." "The samples," Lyra started, but Kira cut her off. "Already transmitted to secure locations across the galaxy. They can destroy this facility, but they can't erase the truth anymore." They raced through the corridors as the first impacts rocked the asteroid. Rowan found himself running beside Lyra, acutely aware of her presence. In the chaos of the past few days, he'd begun to realize how much he'd come to rely on her, not just as a guide to this new world, but as something more. "The emergency bay has a prototype ship," Kira shouted as they reached a heavily reinforced door. "It's fast, stealthy, and completely off the grid, but it only has room for 3. Another explosion shook the facility. Debris rained from the ceiling as support structures began to fail. "Go," Jace said suddenly. "I'll hold them off, buy you time." "Jace, no," Lyra began, but he cut her off with a fierce look. "They're going to find someone to blame for this attack anyway. Might as well be the obvious suspect, the alien who betrayed his own people to help a human." His mandibles clicked in what Rowan had learned was a smile. "Besides, they'll want to interrogate me. That should keep them busy while you find what you're looking for." Before anyone could argue, he turned and sprinted back the way they'd come, his silver scales gleaming one last time in the emergency lights. The prototype ship was sleek and dark, clearly built for stealth rather than comfort. As they strapped in, Rowan caught Lyra wiping away what looked like bioluminescent tears. "He'll be all right," he said, trying to convince himself as much as her. "Jace is smarter than they are." "We need to make his sacrifice count," Kira said from the pilot's seat. "I've identified 3 possible locations for Project Terminus's main research facility. If we're going to find proof that can't be denied or destroyed, it'll be in one of them." The ship slipped out of the asteroid's shadow just as the first enemy vessels began their attack runs. Rowan watched through the viewport as Kira's sanctuary, and any evidence it contained, erupted in a series of explosions. "Where are we heading?" Lyra asked, her markings finally steady again. "The Edge," Kira replied, plotting a course into the navigation system. "The place where it all began and where it might have ended if humanity's plans had succeeded." As their ship vanished into the darkness of space, Rowan felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for the world and people he'd lost, determination to uncover the truth, and something else, something warm and uncertain that stirred whenever he looked at Lyra. He was the last human, a relic of a dead civilization. But here, racing through the stars with an alien scientist who had saved his life and another who had sacrificed everything to help them, he felt something he hadn't expected to find in this strange future: hope. Behind them, the asteroid burned like a funeral pyre. Ahead lay mysteries 5,000 years in the making. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, answers waited to be found, answers that could either heal the wounds of the past or tear the galaxy apart all over again. The Edge lived up to its name. Their ship drifted in the void between galaxies, facing an ancient research station that seemed to float in endless night. Lyra's markings cast soft light across the bridge as she studied the structure. "No signs of active power," she reported, "but the station's core design matches fragments we found in the Horizon's Edge archives." "Of course it does," Kira said, her modified features intent on the sensor readings. "This is where it was supposed to happen, humanity's great leap forward." Rowan stood between them, memories stirring of classified briefings and whispered conversations. "The Ascension Project," he murmured, "it wasn't just about controlling our evolution, it was about transcending it entirely." They docked at a forgotten airlock, the station's artificial gravity still functioning at minimal levels. As they made their way through dark corridors, their lights revealed walls covered in complex mathematical formulae and biological diagrams. "These equations," Lyra breathed, her markings pulsing with excitement. "They're describing consciousness itself, how to transfer it, enhance it, free it from physical constraints." And that's what scared them, Rowan realized. Not just that we could adapt our bodies, but that we could become something entirely new, something beyond physical form. A distant clang echoed through the station. Kira's modified sensors twitched. We're not alone. They quickened their pace, following Rowan's fragmented memories to the central laboratory. The door was sealed, but Lyra's advanced decryption tools made quick work of the ancient locks. Inside, they found both answers and more questions. The laboratory was vast, its walls lined with strange devices that hummed with dormant power. In the center stood a massive crystalline structure, its facets reflecting their lights in mesmerizing patterns. The quantum consciousness matrix, Rowan whispered. It actually worked. Before anyone could respond, lights flared to life around them. A voice spoke from hidden speakers, one Rowan recognized from the council chambers. Indeed it did, said High Counselor Dren Voss as armed figures emerged from the shadows. Though not quite as your people intended. Kira stepped forward facing her brother. You knew, all these years you knew the truth. I protected the truth, Dren corrected. Do you have any idea what would happen if people learned that humanity didn't just die out, that they were deliberately prevented from becoming gods? We never wanted to be gods, Rowan argued. We wanted to grow to understand too. To remake yourselves in whatever image you chose, Dren cut him off. To become beings of pure consciousness free to shape reality itself. The universe wasn't ready for such power, it still isn't. So you murdered an entire species, Lyra's markings flashed with rage, condemned billions to a slow extinction. We saved billions more, Dren insisted. The release of Project Terminus was a mercy compared to the chaos humanity's transformation would have caused. More guards entered the laboratory, weapons trained on their small group. But Rowan noticed something they didn't, the way the crystalline matrix was responding to their presence, its facets beginning to pulse with inner light. You're wrong, he said quietly. About all of it, we didn't fail, we succeeded. Understanding dawned in Lyra's eyes as she saw what was happening. Her markings synchronized with the matrix's pulsing light, creating complex patterns in the air. The consciousness transfer, she breathed. It worked, but not just for humans. Kira's modified sensors were going wild. The station, it's full of patterns, energy signatures unlike anything I've ever seen. Because they're not energy, Rowan said, memories and revelations clicking into place. They're minds, consciousness, human and alien alike working together across 5,000 years to understand what happened, to prepare for this moment. The matrix flared brilliantly, and suddenly the laboratory was filled with shimmering forms, echoes of consciousness made visible. Humans stood among aliens of countless species, all of them watching, waiting. You see, brother, Kira asked softly, this is what you tried to prevent, not chaos but unity, not godhood but understanding. Dren's crystalline features showed the first traces of uncertainty. This is impossible, the project failed, the evidence was exactly what those who remained wanted you to find, Rowan explained. While you hunted down the last physical traces of humanity, something new was being born, something that transcended all our divisions. The shimmering forms moved closer, their presence filling the laboratory with a sense of ancient wisdom and possibility. Lyra reached for Rowan's hand, her markings harmonizing with the matrix's pulsing light. It's not too late, she said, looking at Dren. This is what we found in the ruins of Horizon's Edge, not just evidence of humanity's end but proof of a new beginning. A chance to finish what was started 5,000 years ago. The guards looked uncertainly at their weapons, clearly unsure how to fight beings of pure consciousness. Dren stood frozen, his carefully maintained worldview crumbling around him. And in that moment of possibility, as physical and transcendent beings stood together in the void between galaxies, Rowan felt the last walls between his past and future finally begin to fall. The days that followed the revelation at the Edge became known as the Great Awakening. News spread across the galaxy despite the Council's attempts to contain it. Humanity hadn't been destroyed but transformed. And they hadn't done it alone. In a quiet observation room aboard the Celestial Science Institute, now restored after the attack, Lyra watched Rowan as he worked with a group of xenobiologists. His hands moved through a holographic display, explaining the principles behind consciousness transfer to a fascinated audience. Still surprised by how quickly they accepted it, Kira asked, joining her at the window. The researchers' modified features had become a symbol of the changes sweeping through society, a bridge between physical form and transformed consciousness. Acceptance was inevitable, Lyra replied, her markings creating gentle patterns in the air. The evidence was literally all around us. We just couldn't see it before. The quantum consciousness matrix had been relocated to the Institute, its crystalline structure now serving as a beacon for both physical and transcendent beings. Through it, they learned the true story of humanity's evolution. Some had chosen to transform completely, becoming beings of pure consciousness. Others, like those in the cryopods, had remained physical insurance against the possibility of failure. But most had found a middle path, existing in both states simultaneously, reaching across the boundaries of space and time to guide other species towards similar revelations. Jace would have loved this, Lyra said softly, thinking of their friend. The investigation had cleared him of wrongdoing, but he'd chosen to remain in a remote research post, working to help others understand the changes taking place. Rowan finished his presentation and made his way to join them. Lyra felt the now familiar warmth that arose in his presence, a feeling that transcended the physical differences between their species. The council's officially stepping down, he announced. A new governing body is being formed, with representatives from both physical and transcendent beings. Your brother's been nominated to help lead the transition, Kira. Dren always did adapt quickly when he saw which way the wind was blowing, Kira said with a wry smile. Though I doubt anyone expected him to be one of the first volunteers for consciousness expansion. Through the quantum matrix, they had learned to bridge the gap between physical form and pure consciousness, allowing beings to experience both states. The process was gradually being made available to all species, under careful guidance from those who had gone before. What about you? Lyra asked Rowan, trying to keep her tone casual. Have you decided whether to undergo the transformation? He turned to her, his gray eyes soft. I've been thinking about that, about a lot of things. He took her hand, his touch sending ripples through her bioluminescence. My people sought transformation because they felt limited by physical form, but being here with you, I've learned that true transcendence isn't about leaving the physical behind. It's about finding connections that bridge all boundaries. Lyra's markings pulsed with emotion. Are you saying? I'm saying I want to explore both worlds, the physical and the transcendent, but I want to do it with you. Before she could respond, a shimmering form materialized nearby, one of the transformed beings who had waited so long in the void. Its presence filled the room with a sense of approval and possibility. The universe is changing, the being said, its thoughts translating directly into their minds. As it was always meant to, not through the dominance of one species or state of being, but through the harmony of all. Kira excused herself quietly, leaving them alone with the transcendent observer. Lyra looked at Rowan, seeing in his eyes the same wonder and hope she felt. Together then, she asked, her markings creating a dance of light between them. Together, he agreed, in this form and beyond. The observer's presence rippled with satisfaction. And so the circle closes. What began in separation ends in unity. What started in fear concludes in understanding. As they stood there, physical and transcendent beings sharing a moment of connection, Lyra understood that this was just the beginning. Humanity hadn't ended 5,000 years ago, it had evolved, reaching across time and space to help others make the same journey. And now, standing on the threshold of that greater universe, she and Rowan would help write the next chapter together. Their love, bridging the gap between species and states of being, would become part of the grand story of consciousness itself. A testament to the truth that in the end, all boundaries could be transcended by understanding and connection. The stars stretched out before them, infinite in their possibility. And in the space between physical form and pure consciousness, between past and future, between what was and what could be, a new dawn was breaking. It was not the end humanity had feared, nor the one their enemies had intended. It was simply the beginning of something greater, a legacy of stars that would light the way forward for all those who dared to reach beyond the void.